I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Phil Stutts elects political candidates. He basically keeps his pulse on all the data, AI to interpret the data. What do voters, what do the people of America, what are they up to? What do they want to hear? What's going on in the economy? Why aren't people working? What's going on with the supply chain? What are people worried about? And what are people thinking in terms of the 2024 presidential election? We're going to start gaming what's going to happen in 2024, and we're going to talk about what's happening in the economy now. But first, I wanted to talk to Phil about an issue very personal to him. He had a moonshot. So in other words, he found out 10 years ago he was going to lose his esophagus, and it was a chronic disease that was never going to get better. It was only going to get worse. So part one is not only how he began to cure his disease and whether or not this cure is working, and everyone told him it was impossible, but just in general, what is a moonshot? Why should you do it? How you should approach it, and why it's a good thing for your life. All with Phil Stutts. So, Phil, how are things going?
Well, we have a couple things to discuss.
Yes.
Topics for you.
And we're recording all this because I want to discuss the discussion of topics. But I want to also ask you about your health. Like, how's your throat?
Why don't we wait and why don't you ask me on live on the pod?
We're recording right now. I am asking it.
Are we already going?
Yeah.
Oh.
All my conversations with human beings now are recorded.
I love it. That's awesome. Okay. So this is how we're going to start.
Yeah.
All right. So I would advise the listener to go back and listen to past episodes. Maybe in the first one I was on, which was in December of 2018 or 19.
Well, I know in 2020, I don't know if we discussed it on the podcast or like right afterwards when we were in my apartment, but you were about to have surgery on your throat.
Yeah. So I'll make it really quick. I have a esophageal disease. It's called achalasia. It's basically the nerves in the muscle in my esophagus have died. The doctors believe it was an autoimmune response to maybe poor diet, a gut attack on my body, and it focused in on the esophagus. Anyway, it killed it, and it will never work again, according to doctors. And so about in February of 2017, I'd had the disease for about 6 years. I'd never done anything about it, but I was at a a conference that Peter Diamandis runs, his mastermind called Abundance 360. And he got on stage and he told everybody to take a moonshot. Moonshot is something that people say is impossible and you'll make possible. And I wrote down in my notebook, I'll find a cure to this disease in 5 years. Now, never been a cure. Affects about 1 out of 100,000 people. Most of those people are in their 70s and 80s. I was in my late 30s when I was diagnosed. I'm 47 now.
And when you were diagnosed then, but when do you think was the onset of the illness?
Probably years before. Just, obviously you can't tell because it's inside your body. So
does your throat hurt a lot when you talk?
No, okay. It doesn't affect my throat. It affects my ability to eat food. And the fact that I have a lot of issues in the esophagus because food lodges in there. And even when I drink water and push it down, it stays in there and it ferments and it erodes. And
so it's not like smoothies help.
Smoothies are fine. They're easier, but any other kind of food is hard to eat. But anyway, and so the doctors basically have given me this is in 2015, they told me I basically had about 5 to 10 years before I needed to have a feeding tube or removal of the esophagus, an esophagectomy. And that it's not my voice, it's the removal of my esophagus. They would try to connect my stomach to my throat. And at that point, I'd probably have a feeding tube in addition to be able to, consume liquids, things like that. So it's pretty dire.
Can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're just brainstorming here. So first off, when they remove the esophagus, can they do something like, how they did with polio victims where polio affected the lung? They gave them an iron lung. Can you get like an iron esophagus or like even a plastic esophagus to connect the throat or whatever to the stomach? Yeah,
I think that's where it's going. I think it's actually 3D printing appendages. I think that'll happen, not for maybe an esophagus, but I think it's going to happen with livers and kidneys in the next 5 to 10 years.
So those seem more difficult than the esophagus, to be honest, because the esophagus is just a transport mechanism, whereas the liver and the kidney actually do things. So, I mean, the esophagus is involved in digestion, but not as much as the liver and the kidney. So that's why is it because that this is not a common illness that they don't focus on that, or?
Yeah. It's such rare diseases get very little attention.
So I'm saying this could be your moonshot. Like, why don't you create the esophagus that they put in you?
Well, because I've worked on another project, and if you'll let me finish my damn story.
All right. I'm just brainstorming, trying to help.
No, I know. I appreciate it. I'm just messing with you. But listen, so anyway, I wrote this article in Inc. magazine in February of 2017, and I basically proclaimed I would find a cure to this disease in 5 years because Peter Diamandis told me to take my moonshot, and that was what I was determined it would be. A researcher in the disease got a Google alert, found the article, reached out to me, told me I was crazy, that there was no cure. But she said, there's a doctor at Johns Hopkins, you should probably talk to him. And so I did. They introduced us. He said, well, I want to find a cure to this disease too. Let's work on it together. Long story short, we had, basically years and years of ideas put in implementation, team of around 35 to 40 people around me right now. The path we went on had to be approved by the FDA, by the Internal Review Board at Johns Hopkins. It took years to do that, but in September of 2019, they extracted stem cells out of my thigh muscle, my own stem cells, and then they grew them in a lab. And then right before the pandemic in February 2020, the date you were just talking about, where we were together, and I was, either I can't remember. I think I was going to do it or I just finished. But they basically injected 225 million stem cells into my esophagus and with the hopes of trying to regrow the muscle and get it functioning again. I've since learned, I actually had a conversation with Tony Robbins recently about this, that typically when you do stem cell injections, it's about 100 million, so we did a very large dose. And
why does he know?
Well, he's had a lot of stem cell work.
Because of what he has that growth thing going on?
He's got spinal issues, shoulder issues. He's got other things that he's utilized stem cells on. So anyway, but the pandemic hit, and I couldn't go back to Hopkins to see what would have happened. They basically said, don't expect anything for 8 to 12 weeks, and then after that, we think that, you may see something. Now, this procedure that they did to me has never been done on a human being ever. It's never been done on an animal. The only theory,
Can I back up and ask a question about it, though?
Yeah.
So the idea is stem cells are basically, somewhat like cells from a fetus. Like these are cells that they haven't yet been told what to do. And the idea is you inject them into the body, and depending on what part of the body they're injected into, it's sort of like the cliche, you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with. A stem cell becomes the average of the 5 cells it spends its time with. If it's around your esophageal nerve cells, it'll become programmed with the epigenetics of the nerve cells in the esophagus.
Correct. The reason that they went and did skeletal stem cells instead of fat stem cells or placental stem cells, for me, they pulled muscle out of my thigh and used those stem cells because it mimics the smooth muscle in the esophagus. And although that's never been done on a human being, what was done to me, they have done this exact procedure on pigs that had incontinence issues. So they couldn't push their poop out, so to speak. So they injected this skeletal stem cell into the, I guess the anal region or muscle of a pig, and it seemed to work. That was the only basis they had to go off what they proposed for me. I'm not in a clinical trial. I'm in a compassionate use case, which is like a few steps before even they'd start a clinical trial.
In some sense, you're almost lucky this is a rare disease because they probably really can't do a clinical trial for your disease.
Yeah, right. So we just don't know. That could be you could get a good result, you could get a horrible result. We just don't know. I mean, there's a lot of risk.
You could turn into a pig's ass.
Yeah, that would be even worse. And the other thing is I had to fund this out of my own pocket because obviously there's no healthcare that is going to cover this procedure, right?
Can I ask how much it costs?
A lot.
Well, I would wonder why insurance wouldn't pay for it, because the use of you with a feeding tube for the rest of your life is going to cost them a lot more.
That's not how the healthcare system works, I've learned.
I understand, yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. So back to the story. So when I saw you, I was heading over to do this. I did 225 million stem cells into my esophagus. They actually injected it into the region of my esophagus that had a lot of erosion, muscle erosion. With the hope that it would build back into muscle. So after a few months, I couldn't go back to Hopkins because COVID had prevented that. I didn't go back until the August of 2020. They ran all the procedures. I knew the result already. Nothing had worked. It did not. It was a failure. It did not work. And they basically said to me, "Do you want to do it again?" And this time we're expending everything we have in our stem cell bank, and this is the last shot. And I said, yeah, let's do it again. So we had to go through all these approvals again, which was just a pain in the ass.
Who approves it? Who do you have to approve?
FDA and the Internal Review Board at Johns Hopkins. Mm-hmm. So you have to put a proposal together and, you have to put all these protocols and everything. But anyway, so finally got the approval, and I went in the first week of September of 2021, just a few months ago. And they injected 650 million stem cells into my esophagus, except this time they put it into the thicker muscle region because they worried that the stem cells had kind of leaked out on the last one. It didn't get fully injected. So they injected in the region, the thicker muscle lining. Okay, so that happened. I couldn't eat for like 3 days, because they wanted me to be careful. And they told me, don't expect anything for 8 to 12 weeks, if anything at all. 3 days later, I decided to eat my first meal, and I took a bite with no expectation, and I went, oh my God, that went down easier.
Wow, holy shit,
and
3 days.
And I went, oh my God, well, I don't know what's going on. And so I proceeded to start, obviously over the next few weeks, trying different things, eating different things. I'm about 30 to 40% better. And the way that this disease works is clear. The symptoms never improve. They only deteriorate. So this is a terrible comparison. If you can give me a better comparison, I'm open to it. But I don't have anything that's life-threatening now. But like ALS, right? When people get ALS, you never hear someone improving on it from ALS. They either stay or they deteriorate, right? That's the kind of disease that I have. It's not ALS. It's not the same thing. I'm not trying to compare it. It's not apples to apples, but the deterioration is the same. It's not like some people get autoimmune diseases and then they change their diet and boom, they go away, right? That's not what I was under. So I have seen this erosion for about 11 years, and it's mentally, it's been way draining on me. And
It's depressing, right?
very, yeah. And I don't talk about it because I try to stay positive, but if I'm to be honest, it's not the easiest
And
situation.
Phil, you are actually one of the most positive people I know. I always enjoy talking to you. I always feel better after talking to you. That's the sign of a positive person to me.
Thank you.
And you've been, we had known each other about a year or so before I knew that you were suffering through this.
Yeah.
But when you imagined 5 years later, let's say you didn't do anything, and 5 years later you have to have your esophagus removed
Right.
and a feeding tube.
Yeah.
What would you? I mean, obviously that's depressing. It's stupid to ask, but what specifically would you think or feel, or would you avoid thinking about it, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even go there. So, I mean, I made this proclamation in February of 2017 that I found a cure to this thing in 5 years. I haven't found a cure, but 4 years and 9 months later, I'm improving. Now, we don't know. I won't go back until January to Hopkins, and then they're going to scope it. They'll do a bunch of tests. They'll figure out what's going on. But I do know that my symptoms have improved, and I don't think that's ever happened in the history of this disease. And it hasn't improved 10%. It's like 30 to 40%. In a weird way, for example, I can eat a protein bar now and not have any water. That I would have to take one bite of a protein bar and drink 3 big gulps of water in the past. So something is drastically different. I can't put my, because I can't see it.
That is unbelievable. And it makes you wonder then a lot of things. One is, why would they ever regulate stem cell research when stem cells are like these magic cells? They basically are empty cells with nothing to do. They're shot into your body and they're being told by your body what to do. And in this case, they basically are potentially, we don't know for sure, but potentially they're replacing the dead nerve cells that were in your esophagus. So
Maybe.
it's a miracle drug. Why do you think they ever would regulate this?
I don't. One of two things really with mine, and then I'll answer that. Is either it has healed a lot of the scar tissue that has caused so much of the blockage, right? Or something is functioning again. We just it's one of those two things. We just don't know.
Why can't you take an X-ray and send it to Hopkins?
I will, but they want to do it at their hospital, and there's no opportunity to do that until January.
Okay.
So, and I actually did go to the Mayo Clinic a couple weeks ago, and they did one X-ray, and they did think again, they can't really tell until they do it. Scope me and take a camera down there, but they found that the first half of my esophagus seems to have enlarged in a better way. They just don't know what that means.
Yeah, what enlarged? There's more muscle. There's
just
tissue?
more. I don't know the right word for it, but there's more room in there. They don't know why. That a year ago when they did the same scan, it was more narrow, and
So
now
something
it's
is
larger.
happening. They're seeing something different.
Yeah.
That usually you don't see something different.
Right.
And you, whether it's placebo or not, you are experiencing better symptoms. Your symptoms seem to have improved.
And you were using the language of my doctor, placebo or not. And I tend to say you have to say that, placebo or not. But the fact is I've lived with this for 11 years. I know. I know. I know.
Right, it's not like you could talk yourself into eating better.
I can't. You eat one bite and you feel like you're going to choke. Now I can eat 3, 4, 5, 6 bites, and then I have a little bit of water and it goes down. So
there's a couple interesting things with this. One is, let's say it worked partially, 20%,
Yes.
30% better.
Right.
Technology is always improving, particularly in biotech and stem cell research and genomics, which all overlap. This is something that's not just growing 5% a year, but it's doubling in effectiveness every year. So if something partially worked this year, then 2 years from now, there's going to be a lot more understanding. There's going to be a lot more ways to do this. And the fact that there's any improvement at all means they're in the right direction, and that's only going to get better. So congratulations. I think I'm feeling very optimistic. I was thinking about you all this week because I knew you were coming up on the podcast, and I was really thinking about this illness because we
Yeah.
always talk business, politics,
Yeah.
this kind of stuff, but this is really like the most important thing going on in your life. And I wanted to see how you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, but I learned a lot of lessons with this disease before COVID, right? Like the doctors at the Mayo Clinic 6 years ago laughed at me when I said, "How about we try to find a cure?" And they laughed at me. And they said, "There is no cure. Take your medications." The medications they had prescribed have long-term dementia effects. And they said, but they're good in the short run. And they're like, just take your medications and we'll see in 6 months. And I'm like, no, I really want to try to figure out how we can cure this for, the millions of people that have it. And they go, there's no chance. Now, this is what the doctors at the Mayo Clinic, and I don't harbor resentment. They have to see 100 patients a day. They literally group me with everybody, including 70 and 80-year-olds.
And I should add too, and I'm sorry to always interrupt. The Mayo Clinic, I know you're not saying anything bad about them. This is like Disney World for medicine.
It's the best hospital in the world.
I visited there once for my wife had to get a procedure there, and it's like every floor is like another universe of medical treatment, and you could stay there for weeks and be like get every test and blah blah blah. But here's the thing though, why didn't they just think? Basically, my gut reaction was stem cells. I mean, I've had enough stem cell people on this podcast to know that it's not a cure-all, but it is a huge hope for something where cells are dying. This is what stem cells are for.
Right. And so now the question is, what am I going to do with this? And so obviously I'm talking to other people and working on other ideas that I want to use while I was on the stem cell front. So we'll see where that goes.
Like what?
Well, there are other ideas out there on the stem cell front. I'm sort of in the research phase, but I've been talking to a lot of people on the side just about, like, do I do this procedure again? Here's the thing. My stem cells are old. You need young stem cells. They'll work harder for you. And so the question is there other places I go that don't have much risk that I could try on this as well? And so I'm just looking.
Can't you get like fetus stem cells? Don't they have like banks of those?
Yeah, but the question is who would inject those into you? And that you can't really do that in the U.S.
Why?
Because that would be illegal.
Why is it illegal?
You'd have to ask the FDA and Congress. But you can use stem cells in the U.S. to if you have shoulder surgery, you can use stem cells. Knee problems, you can use stem cells. More of a healing mechanism, but you would have to go to Panama or the Bahamas or over, maybe.
Would you consider doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Panama's got a very good medical system.
Mm-hmm. There's a great stem cell clinic in Panama, but there's some people here. Again, this is what I'm just trying to figure out right now. Like, okay, great, this part worked. I'm not done. Like, how are we gonna make sure I go from, let's say, a 30%, 40% improvement to an 80% improvement? So I'm just trying to work through that right now.
Let me ask you a question. Just why wouldn't you just get on a plane right now and go to Panama, or let's say in January when you saw that this worked?
I'm just going to take my time. Okay. And be comfortable with my decisions. I'm not going to rush into it. I get one esophagus. If I did something and it caused you just don't want to rush this.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. What else do you think can be done now with stem cells? You mentioned for if your shoulder hurts, whatever, but like,
Yeah.
what other illnesses? Like, could this be a cancer thing? Could stem cells crowd out cancer cells?
Yeah, I'm the wrong guy to ask that. I'm just so narrowly focused on what was
Yeah,
going
I
on
get
with
it.
me that I just kind of understand the law behind stem cells, but in the sense of what's legal and what's not. I don't know why it's legal and why it's not, and I don't know what else is out there.
Can I get stem cells in my brain to get more myelin so that my memory improves?
Sure. I have no
All
idea.
right.
No, actually, I don't know.
I feel like everybody talks about, AI and crypto and automated cars, but the reality is, between stem cells and genomics, over the next 20 years, this is going to be the thing that changes our daily lives more than even technology, than
Yeah.
the smartphone or the
Right.
iPad or whatever. Like, everything is going to change because all the cutting edge anti-aging research, stem cell research, genomics research. I don't know why people just don't throw all their money in a basket of
Right.
like 20 genomics and stem cell stocks. 18 of them will fail out of the 20, but the 2 that don't fail are going to be $5 trillion market cap.
Yeah, and I'm sure on your show you're going to have Peter Diamandis and Tony Robbins are writing a book right now.
You just said music to my ears.
Yeah, so they're coming. It's going to be out in February, but I was talking to Peter the other day about it, and obviously I talked to Tony too. But they, I think this is the conversation you need to have with them because those guys know so much about the stem cell world, and they're invested, and they created a company called Cellularity, which is a publicly traded company now.
Oh, and both of them are friends of the podcast. So
Yep.
I mean, both of them have been on quite a bit. So Phil, I'm really glad. And like, there's again other things I want to unpack in this. One is the idea of declaring for yourself, I'm going to have a moonshot. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to create the first, human robot that I could have sex with or whatever. It could be something just in your life. Like if you're 60 years old and want to run a marathon again, that's a moonshot. You might have to study or do or train in ways that no 60-year-old has ever trained before. I don't know. I'm making that up.
No, the key is, and Peter really was right when he mentored me in a way, because we spent time together going over my moonshot. He really helped me, introduced me to a lot of people. But one of the things he said is when you create a moonshot, just create 2 or 3 things that you'll do immediately to get momentum. Right. For me, I'd never told anybody outside my family I had this disease. So I wrote an article in Inc. magazine, proclaimed I'd find a cure. Now I'm on the hook, right? Like I can't back out of this now. Like I had to go for it because I just put it out there to the world, right? It's kind of like when people declare on Facebook they're going to lose 80 pounds and they do a before picture and they say check back in 90 days. Like you kind of back yourself into a corner.
Yeah. No, that's okay. So there's the declaration. So okay, let's deconstruct what a moonshot is.
Yeah.
So there's the declaration, and there's doing something so people could hold you accountable. Now,
one thing on the bigger thing though, James, is yes, the moonshot was about me finding a cure to my thing, but really the moonshot was trying to find a cure for the disease itself, so that millions of people could be. So you have to have a larger purpose, is my point. It can't be like, I want to show the world that a 65, like one is like, you want to run a marathon at 70? I want to show the world that 70-year-olds can run marathons and inspire others to run. Like it's got to be more than just, I want to do it for me and then be done with it. Does that make sense?
I agree. So for instance, for me, I'm really into the idea. The reason I bring up the marathon is because it's similar to, this isn't a moonshot, or not like yours, where it's a life-saving thing, but I'm trying to achieve something that shows that that's for me, but it shows that adults can improve when everyone says adults can't improve. So, for instance, let's say I say to myself, I want to be a grandmaster at chess. Okay, nobody ever started at an older age and succeeded at this. And my whole thing is using the techniques in what I write about in Skip the Line and the techniques talked many times on this podcast. I want to use those techniques and show that it can be done. That particularly when 55 million people were laid off from their careers and are looking to return to their passions of their youth, I want to show that it's possible, that it's bullshit that you need to be 17 years old to be a prodigy or whatever. So yes, you have to connect, but the idea that it's something important to you is important as well, because that gives you more of the motivation on days when you're feeling unmotivated or days when you're feeling down. If it's something that's important to you personally, even though it's connected to a larger purpose, it helps you take that next step that day, even if it's a difficult day to do that.
Right.
But that's good though. Let's unpack what is a moonshot. Like, so there's a larger purpose. I think there has to be a component of you that's connected to you too, that makes you particularly passionate about it. Mm-hmm. But what gives something a moonshot quality?
There's a bigger purpose, and that you're trying to change something in the world as well as trying to change it within yourself.
Trying to change something in the world is a good one.
I mean, again, Peter has a great definition of it. It's very simple. Take something that people say is impossible and make possible.
Right. And I like that definition. I don't think it is complete in the sense that, like you said, moonshots haven't been done before. And because people thought they were impossible. So it has to be so personally motivating as well as kind of macro motivating that you keep on going and doing something that is considered impossible.
Yeah.
I like this idea of declaring it because you're setting it in stone. This is what you're going to do. It's not just something in the back of your head where if you don't do it, nobody knows. And then I like the idea of doing it so people could hold you accountable. It doesn't mean you'll succeed. Maybe you'll make a fool of yourself by not succeeding. If you're trying to lose 40 pounds, you put the before picture.
Will you make a fool of yourself, or do people really not give two shits about anything? Like people.
Yeah, I agree with you.
People like my story, but they don't care about me. So if I failed, they wouldn't be like, ha ha ha, he failed. Like no one. They moved on with their life. They haven't thought about it since they read it 4 years and 9 months ago when I declared it. Right.
But still, that accountability is interesting. And then doing 2 or 3 things to mark up quick successes is good to show that the next steps are at least possible. The first steps are possible.
Right. So I wrote that article, and then the other thing I did is I reached out to all these started interviewing stem cell clinics around the world, trying to figure out, just to understand and educate myself. So those were the 2 momentum ideas that I put in place. And
why did you think stem cells?
So when I Googled the disease, when I got back from that conference, I realized I had never, think about this, I'd had this disease for 6 years and I'd never Googled it, ever. I just outsourced it to doctors and said, well, they'll figure it out. I'm at Mayo. They'll figure it out. And so when I Googled it, I found that there was some research back in the late 90s and early 2000s that said stem cells could be a treatment to improve conditions or even cure the disease. That was, at that point, that was 17, 18 years ago when I looked at it. But there had been nothing in 17 or 18 years. It wasn't like there were other studies. There was nothing. It was just sort of a theory of doctors. And so I said, well, I'm going to take that theory and try to put it in place.
And so, okay. So that you interviewed
That's
stem
where
cell
I came
clinics
up with it
to learn more,
right?
And here you are. Did you look into 3D printing an esophagus? Like, what other things did you?
Yeah, I did. There's a doctor he may be at Duke or North Carolina or somebody. His name is Tony Atala, and he had a TED Talk on 3D printing of appendages. And Peter Diamandis introduced me to him. Wow. And we talked. So he actually interviewed my Johns Hopkins doctor for me and just kind of helped that process for me. But like I interviewed a stem cell clinic in Panama that wanted to use placental cells. So, that's like umbilical cords. I interviewed a stem cell clinic in the Bahamas that wanted to use my own fat cells. And then I talked to the doctor at Hopkins that wanted me to use my muscle cells. So there were 3 different stem cell ideas, and I had to choose. I had to make a decision at some point, like which way was I going to go? And I just went, I feel like the U.S. is obviously their hands are tied behind their back more, but there's more regulation and it's safer. And I just went in that direction.
And so I have a question because maybe I just don't understand the technology at all. But is it possible to use just like fetus stem cells? Do they have to be from you, or can you use like a random fetus?
Yeah, you can use random.
And did you consider that, or that's not?
No, I did. The
allowed?
one in Panama, that's what they offered. But what they were offering was for me to do an IV and hope that the stem cells would find its way to the esophagus and heal it. And I just didn't jive with me. I'm like, no, I think it's got to be a direct injection. And they're like, well, we don't have anybody to do that. And then I'll
do it for you. I'll just inject right into the vein.
Really, I would super trust that. And then the one in the Bahamas, they said, well, we'll try to find a doctor that we can get that would inject that. And I'm like, hold on, I'm not entrusting my life we'll try to find a doctor to inject fat cells into your esophagus. So that was hard. And then the one at Hopkins was like, you're going to be under the Johns Hopkins Hospital, and we're going to inject it with our doctors here. And I went, you know what? I'm going to have to go there because it's kind of like investing, James. I created something. I had a diverse portfolio there. I had a good doctor. It was a safe procedure with them. Maybe the other stem cells could have a better reaction, but it wasn't. So I had to cover all my bases.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I looked at it.
That's the other thing. The fact that it is directly affecting you helps the outcome, because you're not just trying random things just to try it. Like, you're really doing your research and taking into account the risks, which is important in a moonshot. Like, if you go for the moon and you miss, you die.
Yeah.
So
Right. Good point.
It is very. I keep getting back to it. It's great to have the higher meaning, but it's also very important to have the personal meaning, because they're connected in more ways than one. And then I think also, like, you have to know when to give up or pivot or change course in a moonshot. I think there's a lot of moonshots out there where
Absolutely.
you don't, maybe the moonshot changes, maybe you lose interest. In your case, you wouldn't lose interest, but
Right.
you have to know how to assess every day what's going on with this.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too. Now, like, if this didn't work the second time around, you probably would start looking at other things. You probably would be a little disappointed, and you'd have to deal with there's a psychology to moonshots is dealing with when something doesn't work out the way you want it to.
Well, especially after 5 years. One other thing that I think is really interesting, this absolutely is the truth. When I went in February 2020 for the first one, I literally looked at my wife and I said, this is just doesn't make sense. Common sense wise, this just doesn't make sense. I don't think this is going to work at all. I just don't. I have no faith in it. And it didn't work. And I went, see, I knew it wouldn't work. But that's how I felt, right? In August of 2021, before I went in for the second one, my wife and I were sitting on the sofa talking one night, and I looked at her and I said, it's going to work this time. And she goes, what? And I said, it's going to work this time. She goes, I know, it's weird. I feel the same thing. I go, there's a weird feeling I have. I really believe this thing's going to work. And I have no idea if that plays into this at all. And I get that people would tell me it's a placebo, that helped the placebo effect, if that's what it was. But that's truly the way I felt, and I expressed it. And something has worked. So I just don't, there's also this mindset of it as well.
Well, I'm super happy, Phil, and
Thanks.
I hope it continues to work. You got to keep in touch with me on how things are going when you go visit Johns Hopkins. And I do think everybody listening to this, I encourage you to think in terms of moonshots, because it literally not only changes your life, whether something works or not, no matter what, it will change your life. Because, like, Phil, in your case, if this second stem cell treatment hadn't worked, I'll say several things. One is, you've researched and learned about the entire stem cell industry, the state of it right now, what works, what doesn't, and you've had personal experience with it. So that was like your downside, is that you would learn a huge amount. Your upside, of course, is that the illness is cured, and maybe you're used as evidence for how it could cure many, many other people. And the other thing is, you learn kind of the meta language for doing a moonshot, and that could be applied on some level to your business, to your career, to your relationships. You know what it takes. You know the watering that is required to make a seed grow from the imagination to a full garden.
Yeah.
And that's a meta skill that many people don't know, because we're all stuck in our daily grind, our daily worries, and a moonshot is something beyond those daily worries. And I encourage everybody to think in their own lives. It doesn't have to be saving lives. It could be something as simple as, you want to do something extraordinary that nobody's done before. It doesn't have to be like you're going to save the planet, but I encourage people to think in terms of moonshots, and I think it's really exciting. I know, Phil, you and I have talked about this before, but I'm more emphatic than ever about this style of thinking. And now, Phil, for part 2 of this podcast, I want to talk politics. So are you ready?
Yeah, and we can talk about trends in the economy as well, because I'm updated on a few things to update the one thing, feedback I always get is, please keep talking about with Altucher. Every time I'm on, I get emails like, that really helped me, what you found out in the data with the economy. And so
that makes me happy, because I often, I do this podcast in a little basement here, and I often don't always get feedback or look for it, really. I don't really go on social media that much.
Oh my God. Yeah, I get so much feedback.
Stay tuned for part 2, where Phil starts gaming the economy, politics, and everything in between.
how Nationwide is more than an insurance company?
Yeah, they're one of America's largest financial services companies.
We get that in a song like business, life, retirement.
Or Nationwide's there to protect.
I'm kind of the jingle guy.
Not sure I agree with that.
Well, I'm not sure I like your hat.
Well, it would never fit on you.
Products issued by Nationwide Life Insurance Company or Nationwide Life and Annuity Insurance Company. The general distributor for variable products is Nationwide Investment Services Corporation, member FINRA, Columbus, Ohio.